Welcome to the Disability Dialogues podcast by people with disability for people with disability. On the 29th of April 2026, the Disability Dialogue had an open dialogue event called Let's Unpack Ableism. The event was hosted by Skye Cusack, who is a writer, journalist, and a comedian based in Naarm, and James Parr, a prominent voice in fashion and media. In this open dialogue, our guests will talk about their experiences with ableism, including what it can look like for different people and how it affects confidence, opportunities, and everyday life. You will also hear about disability pride and what disability pride means. Event guest speakers included Commissioner Rosemary Kayess, who began a 5-year term as Disability Discrimination Commissioner in January 2024. Ms. Kayess helped draft the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, CRPD, and currently serves on the UN Committee. Laura Nang. Laura works at New South Wales Council for Intellectual Disability, SID for short. Laura is part of a new project called Driving Change. You can listen in for more about this project. And other guest speakers is Barnaby Lund. Drawing on a lifelong lived experience, Barnaby has over 30 years of experience across the private and government sectors in roles spanning across project management, policy, and operation. The event begins with the co-host, Skye Cusack, welcoming the online audience to the open dialogue event.
Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Really excited to have this conversation. My name is Skye Cusack, so I am a light-skinned Aboriginal person. I have medium-length brown hair with a little strip of green at the front. Welcome to today's open dialogue. These dialogue events are a place for people with disability and our community to talk openly and frankly about the things that matter to us. These sessions are by disabled people and for disabled people. And today we'll be talking about a very big topic, ableism. First, I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're all gathering. I'm joining you from the unceded land of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I also want to pay respects to all elders and old people from all the countries that we're gathering from and extend that respect to any First Nations people here today. Always was, always will be Aboriginal lands. And I can see some people are already doing that, but please feel free to acknowledge the countries that you're tuning in from in the chats. Over to you, James.
Hello, I'm James Parr. I have dark brown hair. I am also a light-skinned Aboriginal. I'm wearing a black shirt. So just in case anyone is wondering, we do visual descriptions of ourselves so people who are blind or have low vision know who is speaking and what they look like. It is a part of making meetings and events accessible for everyone as much as possible. For those who have not been to one of our events before, welcome. This open dialogue is designed to be inclusive, accessible, collaborative, respectful, and importantly, fun. This open dialogue is designed, I'm just repeating the same thing. We'll give a shout out to our partners, DANA, Inclusion Australia, Alliance 20, and the Melbourne Disability Institute. We are funded through an information, linkages, and capacity building grant from the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing.
Now, we do have just a little bit of housekeeping to make sure everyone has an idea of how today will go. We really want to create a safe, open, and inclusive place for everyone. So firstly, AI tools are not allowed. We know that this can be a useful tool for people with disability, but we also just want to protect everyone's privacy. We will be uploading a transcript to the event page shortly after this event is over, and we'll also make sure to send the recording to you via email. Secondly, we try really hard to stick to time to make sure we hear from all our guests and have time to hear from you as well, our audience members. This means that James and I might have to interrupt and move things along sometimes. We're not being rude, we promise. We're just trying to keep us on time. We encourage you to have your camera on if you're comfortable with that, so that we can feel that we're sort of in the room together, but it's totally up to you. As we go through, we will be collecting all your comments and questions in the chats, and we may even invite you to ask your question on mic if you would like to.
Cool. So today's event is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Disability Dialogue website. So please be aware when you are sharing things that other people in the public will be able to see it or hear it by watching the recording. So just be mindful about what you share and what you're writing. We also want to acknowledge that today's topic of ableism is something that people with a disability experience, and for some, this topic might bring up some hard feelings of past trauma or shame and can be a little bit triggering. So you're welcome to take a break at any time. If today's event does bring up any difficult feelings and you would like some support, you can visit disabilitydialogue.com.au/support. I might put that in the chat, or if it's already in the chat, with a list of resources available that you're able to access. So yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, so you might have seen a survey that we sent through before this event. It was totally optional, so please don't worry if you didn't get to it. In that survey, we asked you to start thinking about ableism and how often you think it happens, what it looks like, and what you wish people knew about it. We'll bring up some of the results now, as you can see, because we think it's a great way to kick off the conversation.
Yeah. For this first question, we want to know, how often do you think ableism happens? Options range from I think ableism happens all the time to I think ableism never happens. Out of the people who took the survey, 60% said ableism happens all the time, 35% said ableism happens often, and 5% said they're unsure of how often it happens. No one answers it never happens or it happens sometimes. That might be because we experience ableism ourselves and know how often it might happen. I asked to include this question because I think we all experience ableism differently. There's also invisible disabilities and visual disabilities. So I think it's really important to sort of take on everyone's perspective and sort of understand how often it does happen. So yeah, we also asked if you are comfortable sharing what are some examples of ableism that you have experienced. Someone said the society's negative attitude and low expectation about disability is the most common example of ableism that I experience very often. As a detailed example, the bank manager didn't allow me to open a single account because the bank management staff thought that I am incapable of managing my own financial matters. Another person said, always second guessing whether I should clearly point to my neurodivergence as a source of a particular struggle and need, or if it's better not to. What will be more likely to get me taken seriously? Institutional processes such as courts and police not catering for people's different cognitive processing speeds and levels of understanding.
Another question we asked was, what do you want more people to know about ableism? And someone responded, we are all people first and foremost. Casual ableism that occurs through ignorance is still ableism. And someone even put down some examples of ableism. And these included buildings without ramps or accessible toilets, employers assuming a disabled person can't perform a role, schools not providing reasonable adjustments, and medical professionals treating disability as something to fix rather than support. Lastly, we want to talk about pride. Disability pride is all about challenging ableism and speaking up for ourselves and our rights. So we asked you to share what disability pride means to you. Someone said being able to speak up and ask for support helps everyone to fit in. Nothing about us without us. Feeling empowered to be my authentic self and part of a community who understands. And disability pride is about being visible, speaking unashamedly about our needs, and showing the world how our uniqueness is valued. And honestly, we could have had pages and pages of people's responses. We got a lot of really powerful responses. So thank you to everyone who filled out our survey. It's so fantastic to get your ideas and thoughts on the topic, and it really helps us get thinking about ableism.
There's one more thing we need to address, and that's the big announcement that was made last week. Mark Butler, the Minister for Disability and the NDIS, announced changes to the NDIS. He said changes will affect lots of people's plans, and some people will be removed from getting NDIS support completely. Many people are worried about what this means, and the disability dialogue only knows what has been said publicly so far. I'm very pleased to introduce Commissioner Rosemary Kayess, if that's, sorry, I'm not sure if that's how you say your last name, who will talk about this a bit later. Rosemary is the Disability Discrimination Commissioner. She's currently serving as a member of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. She was awarded the Human Rights Medal in 2019 in recognition of her outstanding contribution to the promotion and protection of human rights. Commissioner, can you please say hello and give a brief visual description of yourself?
Good afternoon, I'm Rosemary Kayess. I'm a woman with grey blonde hair. I have a pink and black top on this afternoon, and I'm speaking to you from Larrakia country. I'm currently in Darwin. I'm to speak at the Positive Duty oration this evening, and I've been doing some consultations with the disability community up here. Thank you for your question. The thing about the NDIS announcements last week is probably the extent to which the changes will have an impact on the number of participants of the NDIS scheme. This, understandably will raise significant fear and anxiety within the community, and this comes, months, over 12 months of significant fear and anxiety through the process of the bill that came through Parliament at the end of 2024 and the other proposed changes that have been through Thriving Kids and foundational supports. There's a real concern around the changes that are being proposed, and I think it highlights that the restructure demonstrates some of the core elements of ableism that are at the centre of the NDIS. And primarily to that is that people with disability in relation to the NDIS and in relation to anything are defined purely in terms of their need for care. And I use the term care quite specifically because that's how it's framed in how it's deeply entrenched within our culture. It's not seen as support, it's not seen as something to progress and do other things or in recognition of the ableist structures that stop us from being able to do things within our community, within our families. And so it is seen as the outcome in itself. The receipt of care is seen as the outcome. The outcome is not community participation, being an active member of our society. It's about being a passive recipient of care. The bulk of the data that's collected is about describing the types of services and supports that people receive. It's not about the outcomes that they achieve in terms of community participation. So that link to broader community participation is not embedded deeply in a strategy that's robust, coherent, and driven by data, and it provides a mechanism of accountability. The Australian Disability Strategy is fundamentally not a strategy. It's currently just a list of funded programs. What we don't have is the ability of strategically looking at the NDIS and seeing how it is driving outcomes for people with disability. All we know is that it's providing people with disability with supports. So a series of successive governments have just seen the provision of care in and of itself as the outcome. And in many ways, they turn their backs on the NDIS and tick the disability box as being done. And then they started to realise that people with disability do actually want to be more than passive recipients of care. And that costs money to make happen because we don't have an accessible mainstream society, because none of the work behind the NDIS to make mainstream society more accessible so people could actively participate had not been undertaken because states moved away from their responsibilities and obligations under that element of the NDIS structure. And so that's why we don't have the foundational support. We don't have the market stewardship that was needed. And we don't have all those elements that would make it less of a financial impost and a far more targeted strategic program. We don't have human rights indicators. There's not an outcome framework attached to it. And that's what that restructure needs to do. The government needs to be more transparent about what the functional test will involve. And it will also need to be something that has got people at the centre of it. Choice and control was to be at the heart of the NDIS and to align with the rights and freedoms which people with disability should enjoy, such as individual autonomy. And I mean, that should dictate the way they can choose and control their supports that will enable them their independence, as well as being active, participating members of the community on an equal basis with others in employment, education, housing, and social participation. These are the elements that cannot be lost.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Now, we have a few questions for Commissioner Kayess about our topic today, ableism and disability pride. So, Commissioner Kayess, you have a very important job protecting the rights of people with disability. For those of us who might not know, can you tell us about your role as the Disability Discrimination Commissioner?
My role as Commissioner is one of an independent advisor to the government. So I'm fundamentally the conduit between the disability community, the government, and the disability sector, promoting Australia's implementation of the obligations under the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I also work very extensively on TDA reform, although that's something that I've worked on over the last 30 years. There's a clear conflict of interest between certain elements of the complaints process. So whilst I work within the policy framework, I don't have any role in the legal framework. There's a very clear distinction made between complaints and what the complaints section of the Australian Human Rights Commission does, and the role of the Disability Discrimination Commissioner and the policy team.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So what kinds of ableism do you think are hurting disabled people in Australia the most right now?
Look, at the heart of ableism is the low expectations of people with disability. And it has to be the most deeply entrenched ableist trope that has an impact on the lives of people, all people with disability. Whether it's the reduction of us and our relationship to the need for supports and care, or the infantilising of our lives, or the deeply entrenched segregation embedded in special programs, law and practice. And this, this is where we see the reduction in people's academic, economic opportunities and increases in their social isolation. It puts in place vested interests to maintain that status quo. You build a special school, you have to use it. You develop a business case of segregated employment facilities. And in Australia, we use the term Australian Disability Enterprises as a euphemism. And it is hard to break it up. We know we've tried for 30 years. And it is that ableist attitude that defines people with disability only in relation to their need for support. They all assumed that once the NDIS was put in place, they could tick that disability box, and there was nothing else to see here. It ignores the fact that people with disability are a broad, diverse group with an array of life ambitions. If people generally are considered to be a heterogeneous group, why are people with disability considered to be a homogenous group?
So could you, just for people that may be unaware, could you break down the homogeneous and heterogeneous group? Just, I'm not sure like how you interpret that term, and just to explain to other people.
Everybody has multiple layers of personal identity. They have different life statuses. They may be a woman with children. They may be Aboriginal. They may be they may be in a same-sex relationship. They may love sailing. They may hate. Oh God, I don't know. I mean, everybody has different life ambitions and goals and dreams, and so nobody is all the same. So a homogenous group is something that is all the same. So homogenous milk is where the cream and the whey is mixed together and it's all one thing, and it's all white and it's all bland and it's just milk. But a heterogeneous group is something that's got multiple identities and multiple genus. So it's just the difference between something that is considered to be all the same, all people with disability the same, or if they're seen as a heterogeneous group, there's recognition that there are different varieties, that they're not all the same.
Thank you for explaining that, Commissioner. And this is just a fun fact for everyone. I used to work for a dairy company that specialized in non-homogeneous milk. And so I just like had this vision while we were speaking of like That's just, I completely understand what you mean about that example, and I never knew that it was so related at that time when I was working there. So
Milk,
what,
I was going to say
yeah,
before.
yeah. So what do you wish more people knew about ableism?
I suppose all of the above. I mean, having an understanding of ableism and the way that it's so deeply entrenched within our culture, and the fact that it's embedded in law, policy, and practice. So the fact that we have segregated schools, people see it. Obviously, there must be a need for them. They must be the right way to go. So they're seen as benign. They talk about care in a way that I was listening to, and I mean, this is in the older person space, but it still relates to disability and impairment. But I was listening to the assistant minister be interviewed on the ABC about a week ago about the change to the recognition of having a shower and getting dressed and incontinence care as being included in what they call the clinical services, so people didn't have to pay a co-payment. And the assistant minister was describing why they had made this change. And he said, well, when we were setting it up, we spoke to the experts, and the experts suggested that we do it this way. And so we followed the advice of the experts. Didn't indicate who those particular experts were. And then he said, now we've been talking to older persons and we've been talking to their carers, those fabulous people, all those fabulous people that care for older persons. And they're such angels, and it's presented as such a benevolent, and burdensome task that people take on doing care, and it's seen as so charitable, and so it's either seen as benign or benevolent, and so it's seen as something positive when what you're doing can be very oppressive and very damaging for people with disability, especially in terms of segregation. And so people see it as just an accepted part of our society, and so there's no challenge to it. And so it's sort of what I wish people knew about ableism is that it can be, some of those things are incredibly damaging to people. We have a care system where sexual assault gets normalised within administrative processes. We have an education system where, building purpose-built cages to put kids with autism in is problem solving. It's just, it's phenomenal that sort of behaviour can be normalised within our culture and not challenged. So I really do wish people had more understanding of how ableist tropes can be really, really harmful and damaging. And I mean, and to recognise that people with disability are not inherently vulnerable. I mean, lots of this stuff is put in place because that assumption that we are all inherently vulnerable because of our disability. We're not. We're vulnerable because of the inequality and discrimination that we experience. And we don't necessarily need special segregated things to keep us safe, because the experience for many people, and the Disability Royal Commission has, demonstrated this with evidence, that sometimes, most of the time, it's the special segregated things that are doing the damage. And so I also wish people understood the difference between impairment and disability. And it's disability that we want to address, not the impairment. We don't want to fix people. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, I understand medical advances, and yes, they're fabulous. But it's not about adjusting the person to meet the system. You've got to have the mechanisms within the system so the person can flourish.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can see that people who wear glasses, not many people these days would see themselves as having a disability. They may acknowledge that they have an impairment, but not a disability. And if a person without their glasses interacts with social systems, such as the printed word, but cannot read the printed word, it's a disability. The use of glasses changes that environment, making it more accessible, removing the disability, but their impairment remains the same. But we've normalised vision impairment into our public health system. Eye checks are freely available at every shopping centre. Glasses are affordable and readily available. And in our culture, glasses are seen as a fashion accessory, not assistive technology. Yet, try and translate that into any disability context these days, and it's virtually impossible. So you can normalise this stuff and make it less special, for the want of a better word.
Thank you. I think we might jump into the audience Q&A now, and I can see some people are putting questions in the chat. Is there anyone that wants to come on mic and ask a question, or otherwise I can just kind of start reading things from the chat? Okay.
I have one here,
So,
Skye, if you'd like me
yeah,
to
please
ask that one.
go.
This one is from Sam. So Sam is really keen to know if the UN has any power or responsibility to do anything about the changes to the NDIS that are going to happen in the budget.
Well, no, I don't have any special wand. I don't have any special power to change any of the elements of the NDIS restructure. What I will be doing and have been doing is engaging with both ministers and, where I can, trying to influence what comes next.
Okay, so I see that Jax has a hand raised.
Are we still taking audience questions verbally if people want to? I don't want to jump in if I'm not in a speaking order.
Please go.
Apologies, I was late. I had to get my wheelchair fixed. Disability life, so I didn't catch the start of this. And if this is off topic, feel free to. But I guess I'm just really interested in the kind of interplay or connection between like ableist systems and internalized ableism, and how that any comments or ideas on how to address that, and I guess the role of the disability rights movement in both external and internalized ableism.
I find it really interesting that the internalized ableism, and you can see it, and I've seen it in similar related forms, but in different ways. When I first acquired my disability and I was studying at university, the funding language was around severe and profound. And you started to notice that people within the community, and especially parents of young children with disability, started to refer to their children as severely and profoundly disabled. So they had internalized the threshold that the funders required for their child to be funded at school. And so they were taking on the language of the departments around severely and profoundly disabled. And I saw it, I've seen it recently, and this is, I'm going to get some blowback for this, but I see it in some ways nearly the same thing. Or, and I'll see how it could be an alternative. I noticed when the NDIS moved to requiring a diagnosis, a primary diagnosis, and people started to introduce themselves as, you know, such and such with, and then a labeled diagnosis afterwards. And I thought, is this the same thing happening again? Are we internalizing that need to justify our existence or our receipt of support with a label? And that has to become part of our identity. The alternative way of looking back at that is also to think, well, maybe people were using, you know, if they had, you know, had to choose a primary and they had a secondary diagnosis, which I found hilarious with the NDIS. I should note a disclaimer here, I'm not an NDIS recipient, I'm not a participant of the scheme at all. But it could have also been used ironically, but I think the subtlety of the internalised ableism shouldn't be lost, because it's worrying, and it's going back to the language of respite. It'll be interesting to see if that starts to have an influence on you know, the internalised concept of the burden that people with disability are to their supporters and their families.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, for answering the questions and being here today. I'd like to bring up our next speaker, Laura Nang. Laura, can you please introduce yourself and give a visual description? One second, Laura, you're on mute. Maybe, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Hello, my name is Laura Nang. I have brown straight hair, brown eyes. I am wearing a dark blue top. I work at New South Wales Council for Intellectual Disability. We say CRPD for short. I am part of a project called the Driving Change Team. My team is a part of the National Centre for Excellence in Intellectual Disability Health. I have a dog named Simba. I love taking him for walks and I like cuddling him. I have an intellectual disability. I am an advocate for people with intellectual disability.
Thank you, Laura. My first question is, does Simba look like Simba? I'm kidding. No, my first question is, what does ableism look like for people with intellectual disability?
I am going to talk to you about ableism in healthcare and what people with intellectual disability experience going to the doctor. To me, ableism towards people with intellectual disability is people making assumptions about us, often assuming we don't understand and so not making the effort to provide us with support. For example, if a person with physical disability goes to visit the doctor's office that only has stairs or take a long time to go around the building that is not accessible, when a person with an intellectual disability visits the doctor and the signs are not clear, there are no pictures or have lots of jargon, that is not accessible. Information needs to be in easy read. There needs to be space to wait for a doctor, a space that is quiet with not too many people. Also, about easy read, and have a clear understanding, like clear information, like simple plain language and with picture and big font and what in bold. Medical professional can sometimes be disrespectful. I have had an experience of doctors not talking to me, instead talking to my mom. A lot of people with intellectual disability have this experience. It is frustrating when doctors assume that my support person knows more about my health. I am the one that experienced my health. I am the expert. Medical professionals also make assumptions about my health.
Thank you, Laura, for sharing that. You have a personal experience with this as well. If you're comfortable, can you share that with us?
Yes, I would like to say an experience I had. I not assume I was sick without asking me any questions. The nurse assumed I had diabetes based on her judgment of me. She saw in my medical history that I had been taking a medication that some people take for management of diabetes. I told her that I don't take the medication for diabetes. She assumed the medical history was over me being right about my health. She did a test that I didn't need to have. She could have made simple adjustments to communicate with me.
Yeah.
I don't like when people assume things about me and don't try to listen. It makes me feel sad. It makes me not want to talk to the medical professionals because I am not respected. And I have some good experience with doctors because I have educated my GP to listen to me and use simple language and easy read when I see him. It is important that people with intellectual disability or their families advocate for them to be listened to.
Thank you so much for sharing and speaking up about that, Laura. How can healthcare and other important services be more accessible for people with an intellectual disability?
When healthcare professionals are speaking to people with intellectual disability, be clear, use simple words and instruction, write things down in simple words, not jargon. Community nurses coming to your house just to do checkups will make getting tests more accessible, like getting blood tests, injection, or even how you're feeling. And people with intellectual disability can sometimes be scared of procedures or injections. Being able to have injection done in a safe place at your home makes people feel okay. People with intellectual disability should work together to find solutions to big issues and improve accessibility. Have a conversation and listen to other people. Respect other people's opinions. My job as an advocate for people with intellectual disability is to listen to other people's experience and try to represent them. We have the experiences and we have the solutions.
Thank you, Laura. If anyone has any questions for Laura, you can put them into the chat. First question, you've touched on it a little bit, Laura, but what can doctors do to be more inclusive of people with an intellectual disability?
Doctors should have one-on-one conversation with the person with an intellectual disability. Make sure the person makes the choices for themselves. Doctors should learn more about people with intellectual disability, like what support the person needs to communicate. Doctors should do training, attend webinars or workshops led by people with intellectual disability.
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to jump in and ask a question, if that's all right. Before we finish with this great conversation, what is one key message that you want to leave with people about ableism?
People shouldn't make judgments about people. Ask people before you assume. Everyone has different needs and different kinds of support that will be helpful for them. Talking about your own experience is important.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Laura. That was incredible.
Thank you, Laura. So now we're going to have a 10-minute break. This is time to have a stretch, a cup of tea, whatever you may need. After the break, we'll be joined by Barnaby Lund from DANA, who has some great stories to share about how he and his community challenges ableism. And we've just put it again in the chat, some support resources if you need while you're having your 10-minute break. But we'll see you back in 10.
That everyone had a nice break. So now I'd like to welcome to the virtual stage Barnaby Lund. So Barnaby has more than 30 years of experience in project management, policy, and operations. He draws from his lifelong experience of deafness to help organizations create inclusive workspaces and public spaces. Barnaby, could you say hello and give a visual description of yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Barnaby Lund. I'm wearing a black t-shirt. I'm wearing glasses, and I have a greying beard. And yeah, I work for Disability Advocacy Network Australia. And yeah, thank you for having me here today, everyone.
Thank you for being here, Barnaby. So you were part of a community-led project called Deaf Movie Club Brisbane. Could you tell us about what inspired you to do this?
Yeah, so this was back in around about 2010. What had happened was some of the four main big cinema chains had in response to community lobbying for access, had put in some what they called captive view devices in their cinemas, and these are devices which you put in your cup holder and then you position the screens so you can read captions off that little screen whilst you're watching the movie. But the technology itself didn't work very well. And to be honest, having something like that, something small like that, when you're watching a 2-hour movie is quite uncomfortable. So a lot of the community were sort of deciding that they weren't going to use these devices anymore, which is a shame because the big cinemas thought they were doing the right thing, but you had that problem of not really having enough input from the community. Yeah, so in response to that, my partner Sigrid and I, we decided to set up Deaf Movie Club Brisbane, which is it was a group of people from the deaf community working with independent cinemas, and the idea was that we would group together and we would hire a theatre and ask them to show captions on the screen, which is a much better way to experience a movie. Yeah, so that's what we did. We did that for a few years before Sigrid and I left, but I understand it kept going for a while. Yeah, and it worked quite well. We did joke that if we wanted to have a cinema date, we had to take 50 people with us. But it worked quite well, and you know, a lot of those people were our friends from the deaf community. So these were monthly events, and they did quite well. They were quite popular, although there were some challenges sort of getting it off the ground, which I can talk about later.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big group date, biggest group date I've ever heard of. And so you said before that there is an ableist idea that cinemas are afraid that they won't make as much money if they show captions on the screen. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so the big four cinemas decided that they'd tick their disability box, the way Rosemary was talking about it earlier. So disability had been done, if you like. But in reality, what was happening was people weren't actually accessing the cinemas in the way that they'd sort of imagined. And when people started to say, hey, what about putting the captions on the screen? Their response was no, because the regular cinema goers wouldn't like that and that they would lose out on ticket sales. But what we found when we actually spoke with independent cinemas was the inverse was happening. So what was happening is we would set up a monthly movie with captions on the screen, and we found it wasn't just deaf people that were going to those movies, because there's a lot of other people in the community who also benefit from them. So people who have auditory processing disorders, people who perhaps learning English as a second language, um, older people who might, might not be profoundly deaf, but might be having trouble hearing some things or distinguishing accents and that kind of stuff. Um, and of course, when you take your kids to the movies as a deaf person, you're not really able to advise them on what's happening if you don't know what's going on. So captions would also be great for younger people who are learning to read and write, or who need guidance on what's happening within the movie.
Yeah, thank you. So you've also said people are misled into ableism. What do you mean by this?
Yeah, so that's kind of referring really to what I was saying earlier about the big four ticking that box and thinking they'd done their work. So they presumably the people who had rolled out the Captive View devices were doing it not just to tick a box, but they would have spoken with the people that make that technology. There would have been discussions around how it would be rolled out and how much it would cost and all that sort of stuff. And it was a solution that they'd come up with, but it was largely not a solution that was very well consulted with the community on. So what I'm saying is people can be misled into to implementing ableist ideas because they don't really understand the full impacts of those ideas on the community at large. And this goes back to what Rosemary was saying about co-design and things like that being very important, and what Laura was also saying about doctors really having a good idea of what the patient needs and how to communicate that kind of thing. So yeah, it's really around consulting more closely with the community to make sure that these ideas that they have aren't inherently ableist.
Yeah, and so I guess on that note, have projects like the Deaf Movie Club been expanded elsewhere?
Yeah, so my understanding, this was quite, some time ago now, but my understanding is that there are still some similar projects going on in other areas of Australia. So I know in Bendigo, uh, down in Victoria, um, we actually have a movie theatre close to us who do they do sensory friendly events, which are sometimes captioned as well. But the idea being that the volume in the cinemas is lower and the lighting is lower, so people with sensory issues can have a nice experience. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of things happening in that sort of space, but perhaps not organised in the way it used to be, because there was apparently clubs in Sydney and Brisbane and Melbourne. Yeah, so it's been some time since I've been involved in that, but I do know that the cinema that we work with up in Brisbane is also still showing those kinds of open caption movies and having more accessible, friendly sort of events.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. So, what advice would you give people who have an idea to make their community more inclusive? And this could be tips for finding like-minded people, funding projects, things like that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And in probably well in this case, what we did was to get our event off the ground. We actually approached uh, what was Deaf Services Queensland, now Deaf Connect. We also got letters of support from Better Hearing Australia Brisbane, and a couple of other organisations in the deaf community who supported our idea. And then we took that to a number of independent cinemas and said, this is what we'd like to try. And then it was really a case of having those conversations with the cinemas and working out when we could do it and how much it would cost and that kind of thing. And then we went back to Deaf Connect, who at the time had some community grants available. So they were able to provide us with a bit of startup money. And so that was to hire the first theatre and get that underway. And then we were able to have people then pay a small membership fee to keep that fund going. And what that meant was we could put a deposit down on the theatre, and then on the day, people would just they'd prepay for their tickets and come in. So a part of that ticket was actually also to hire the movie theatre itself, which worked pretty well because it meant we got a theatre to ourselves, which was always really nice. But also it gave the movie theatres, the cinemas, some reassurance that, that they weren't taking on the financial risk here and only 2 or 3 people would show up. So it was a way for everyone to sort of feel comfortable about the process. So yeah, they're the kinds of things I would suggest. You know, who are your partners? Who are the organizations or people that can support your idea? Where can you get funding from? Um, and what are you actually trying to achieve? So for us, it was really looking at what what were we trying to achieve? We were trying to achieve um, accessible movie experiences for people who are deaf and other people who could also benefit from that. And so that kind of drove our process. And so, yeah, it's really about just, I guess, just thinking about what you want to achieve and how you go about it. Um, and maybe looking for a mentor or someone who's done that kind of thing before can be really helpful, because it can give you some insights into processes and things that you might not have considered.
Yeah, thank you so much. There really is nothing like the power of a letter of support. That's just my honest opinion. So we thank you for that. We're going to jump into an audience Q&A right now, if that's all right with you, Barnaby. And so question number 1 from Carly is, what is the cinema in Brisbane called?
Yes, so it was Blue Room Cinnabar, which is in oh gosh, Rosalie, I think. Um, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure they're still around.
Yeah, okay. And so, is there anyone else that wants to jump on? Otherwise, I am so interested in this. I could ask like a million of my own questions, but I figure maybe it's nice to give someone else a turn to speak with you. But I guess, yeah, in terms of kind of coming back to that concept of like finding like-minded people, like what is kind of your kind of, because I think community is such a big part of this and kind of helping us feel kind of grounded and safe while we're kind of surrounded by, our experiences of ableism. And so kind of what was your process for like kind of building community?
Um, so a lot of the people we already knew through the deaf community. And so there was people that were willing to support the idea. Um, and that's partly because we had discussed through a Facebook group called Action on Cinema Access. Um, we discussed a lot of these issues. So the deaf community in Australia is spread out everywhere. We're all over the place. And the beauty of Facebook groups is it allows you to I guess, leverage the knowledge of the community and the ideas of that community and make things happen. So we were really lucky we had people who knew about the technical aspects of putting open captions on the screen. Um, so we were able to understand that when a movie is released, the cinema is supposed to ask for a digital key that also activates the captions. So understanding the technical stuff behind it was really part of the key to being able to do this. And we probably wouldn't have done it quite as effectively without that community knowledge. So yeah, it's really, really important to have um, access to people who understand various things about what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think what would be great now is to say, first of all, thank you to Barnaby for that. That was incredible and so interesting. But I think that what we're going to do is keep the conversation going. So it would be great to bring Laura and Commissioner Kayess back, and then, have Barnaby here as well to answer a few more questions from the audience. We might not get to everyone's questions today, but please feel free to put them in the chat and then we can get back to you later. Okay, so I think there was a question that I saw. I'm just scrolling up from Linda, and it was for the commissioner. And it said, from Linda, what can we as professionals and family members do to ensure that ableism is disrupted and people with disability can have their needs met in a person-centered way?
Skye, can I just ask you to repeat that question for me, please?
Of course. So from Linda, what can we as professionals and family members do to ensure that ableism is disrupted and people with disability can have their needs met in a person-centered way?
I mean, I think it's about being diligent about the need for consultation, and it's engaging with processes in a way that is consistent but respectful. And so it's about holding systems to account for the processes that should be in place. But we should also be advocating and being engaged with our membership organisations. The strength of disability organisations of people with disability are their membership bases. The members are the sum total of the organisation, and so being actively involved and supporting disability organisations is incredibly important to ensure the representative voice of people with disability. I couldn't do my work without the work that's done by both the membership organisations of people with disability and their allies in the advocacy network.
Thank you, Rosemary. We do have another question here from Kath. What is a simple way to explain ableism to people without disability in a sentence or two, especially during training? Is it helpful to compare racism and feminism? This is for everyone who would like to join in on that question.
Well, ableism is basically the same as racism and sexism. It's about the power relationships. It's about where power sits. So sexism, it was about the power differential between women and men. Men had the power. And so women were viewed as emotional, irrational, and they weren't conceived as being intelligent enough to do leadership roles, study, to do maths, those kinds of concepts. And the same was applied to different races and is applied to different races around the world. There were programs that were designed to show that people who were Negroes had smaller brains than people who were Caucasian. And so it's the same type of relationship. In ableism, what it is it's seen that people with impairments are seen as less than, and not capable of doing or not able. And so it's that power relationship that needs to be understood. So the power is with able-bodied people or people that don't have impairments. And it devalues and looks at people with impairments as a deficit. It's a negative, and it's embedded within our cultural framework. And if you look at human rights that have tried to address racism and sexism, it's about addressing those core power relationships.
Thanks, Rosemary. I think it's also interesting, we won't touch on it, but like the way you're mentioning racism and sexism, it's interesting how it overlap as well within intersectionality. Yeah, I think Skye, do you have the next question?
I sure do. I'm ready to go. So I will throw this one to Barnaby, but again, any of the speakers, please feel free to jump in if you have a perspective you'd like to add. And so I'm so sorry. I don't know if this is Phi or Fee. I'm gonna say this is a question from Phi, but if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm so sorry. And it's for Barnaby, and it says, for people who identify as living with an impairment versus a disability, how do you approach conversations about, being supported and being heard and being understood?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. It is a good one. I mean, the way I see it is we only really have an impairment or a disability when we experience a barrier. So it's very much about the world around us rather than us, our own personal abilities and things like that. So I try, I guess, to explain to people that we're all human. We all want to feel safe in the world and to exercise the same rights and things like that. And I guess I try to give people an insight, I guess, into my experiences. It could be things like at school where when I used to have to try and listen to the teacher dictating notes and things like that. I probably didn't have the words then to describe how difficult that was to me, but I think as an adult I've gotten to develop a bit of a vocabulary and a bit of confidence in saying, hey, look, this is not working for me. Can we think about alternative ways to do this thing? And I think that's very much applies to ableism. We come up again and again against barriers, and we have to think about practical ways around those barriers. And you also, it's a two-sided thing. So it's not just about say me benefiting from captions. It's also about me bringing my friends and family to your cinema, and you actually increasing your sales numbers. So yeah, that's how it is. It's a two-sided thing, and you have to really sell the benefits for both people.
Thank you. James, I
Thank
might
you.
pass back to you.
Yeah, this next question is for Laura. Laura, what does disability pride mean to you?
As a person with a disability, and it is important to share your experience and be part of who you are. You should speak up about issues that are important to you, and people with intellectual disabilities deserve better to advocate for themselves and ask for support that help you to speak up for yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. We're just seeing if we have any more questions for
I
everyone.
saw Julian put a hand up and then ran away. So Julian, please come back.
I did. Oh, here's Skye. I'm not running away.
Great.
Look, I was going to ask Laura a question as well. Is that okay, Laura? I really liked what Laura said before about people making assumptions about Laura and what she likes and what she can do and what she can't do. And that just really resonates with me. I am wondering, Laura, if it's okay, if you can explain to me a little bit more about how it makes you feel when people make assumptions about you and what you can do and what you like and things.
Yes. Well, yes. Yes. I have come across a lot of people, like doctor experience, people make assumptions that's not true about me. And I don't like it. Yeah. Thing like what I said, like they think that I have diabetes, but I don't, and a lot of other things. Like, yeah, because I used to take metformin, that's for tablet for diabetes, but I don't have. I did take it, but not anymore. But doesn't mean I have, because I don't. And to just like this, like for like everyone, not just for people with disability, for everyone, that doctors or like nurses should like make sure that they listen before and understand the point and not making judgment. Like just understanding and listening to a person with a disability or other people, and just understanding their needs to get to know you better. And
Thank you.
and like, so you don't feel like upset or scared. Make them feel like comfortable when it's talking to you in a polite way.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
We have another question here from Luke. How can we speak up for ourselves and speak up to people that push us down? Does anyone, I think maybe we could all rapid fire and answer with one sentence maybe? If everyone would like to answer that one. So I think it'll be interesting that everyone here has different perspectives and how they advocate for themselves. Anyone like to go first? Maybe Rosemary?
Look, we are generally not very good advocates for ourselves. Most people are generally not very good advocates for themselves. And I know that, I'm much stronger in standing up for other people than I am for myself. It's a skill we have to acquire, but I suppose it's about having a belief in your rights and what you want out of life. And if people are talking to the people around you, then you need to respectfully and forcefully remind them that you're the person that's centered to this conversation and that you should be a part of it. And I mean, that's, not always easy. Sometimes you just want to roll your eyes and let the others deal with it, because you couldn't be bothered taking on that person's attitude. But then again, it's also a case of a little bit of community education along the way. So I reinforce that it needs to be respectful. And look, don't get me wrong, sometimes when I've been flying for 30 hours and I'm dealing with someone that wants to talk to somebody else, the last thing I feel like being is respectful. But you need to, try and keep it as one of the pillars of good advocacy is to, engage with the
I
person
think
where they're at
I think
and try and
100%. Yeah,
get
I
your
think for
voice
me,
out.
like I was 21 when I acquired a disability, so and before that I was teaching in special ed, so I sort of had that juxtaposition of being able-bodied, working in special ed, and then being disabled myself. And I think when it comes to, speaking up for ourselves or speaking to people that do push us down, I think I always put myself into being ignorant about disability, not being aware of disability, that's where it does come from. So, especially myself, before I acquired a disability, I was ignorant. So I always like to sort of try and understand where that ignorance comes from and sort of like question back and sort of get them to unpack it or think about it. And I think, it's still evident with me today. I've had a disability for 5 years, and I think all these things that we're taught are sort of just like thought processes that are actually not our thought processes, if that makes sense. So instead of, I don't know, just like my way to sort of speak up is to sort of question it and let them sort of find the answer themselves in what they're doing, obviously when the time's right.
Thank you, everyone. I mean, I think this was really great. Unfortunately, I would love to keep sitting here and asking questions and hearing answers, but we have come to the end of this Q&A section. And so, James, I might just pass it over to you if that's all right.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a great conversation. I'd like to thank our amazing speakers, Commissioner Rosemary, Laura Nang, and Barnaby Lund. We're going to wrap up this event now, although like Skye said, I'm sure we could go on for hours about this topic because there's so much to unpack. I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. If you enjoyed this topic, be sure to register for our next open dialogue in May. The topic is staying strong, First Nations disability rights and justice. Open dialogues are a place to listen, and for our open dialogue next month, we will centre the voices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have been impacted by the justice system. Please be sure to register for that event. The link is in the chat. As always, we really want to hear what you think of today's event and share your feedback. So if you have a few moments to complete the survey, we would also really love that. The links are available in the chat, and the survey is also available in Easy Read. The survey will pop up on your screen once the event is over as well.
And so now thank you to all of you, everyone who attended. And I just wanted to really quickly give a shout out to the watch party happening at Minda in Adelaide. Although this is my first time hosting, the team have let me know that they love seeing you guys here each month. And I just think that's really cool. So just, shout out to you guys. And then just kind of more broadly to everyone else, if you do know someone who missed out, or if you want to just kind of relive this incredible, iconic session, then just a reminder that we do record all our open dialogues. So this recording and a transcript will be available on today's event page. So thank you all, and goodbye for now.
That was a Disability Dialogues open dialogue event on Let's Unpack Ableism. This podcast episode was produced by the Disability Dialogue, a national project for people with disability by people with disability. For more information on the Disability Dialogue and future events, visit www.disabilitydialogue.com.au or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn by searching the Disability Dialogue.